the reason why the idea of marital rape faces so much resistance, or there's a lack of recognition that, marital rape is a crime, is it kind of stems from the idea the idea of implied consent or perpetual consent, that when a woman has agreed to enter into a marriage with a man, she has agreed or given her consent for a man to engage, or for her husband rather, to engage in sexual relations with her whenever he wants. So this is the implied consent theory, and this kind of because the Pakistan Penal Code, our law is based on, or was given to us by the British. Their kind of basis, their kind of understanding of marital rape stemmed from the statement of this British barrister and jurist Sir Matthew Hale, who kind of established this idea that a man cannot rape his wife, because when the wife consented to the marriage, she gave herself up to the man for sexual intercourse. So we saw that throughout like the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s in the UK, this idea kept being perpetuated that the woman has given her consent to the man. There's also a secondary idea of the woman being the man's property after marriage, so therefore the man has the right to engage in sexual intercourse whenever he wants. So this idea of that when two individuals are in a marriage and they've consented to that marriage, the woman has given her perpetual consent to allow the man sexual access. When you add that layer of in our context, we are a country which kind of looks at Islamic principles when we're legislating or when we're enforcing laws. We also have this tendency of cherry picking Islamic provisions, and then saying that a woman can't deny her husband sexual access, which is entirely contrary to established Islamic jurisprudence, which states that marriages should be based on principles of love and tranquility and mercy. Marriages are supposed to be a safe space for both spouses. Islam outlaws violence or any kind of harm between any individuals, and frowns upon any kind of ill treatment of wives. So essentially, so basically, that's the kind of generally how it should be looked at, but we tend to kind of look at it through the lens, a very, very narrow lens of that it is the wife's duty to provide the man sexual access, and if she's not doing that, then the man can force himself upon her. So the lack of recognition of marital rape being an offense is essentially the first problem that you have, that it is not considered a crime itself, or it was not considered a crime for a very, very long time. In fact, in the UK, it was only criminalized in 1991 through judicial pronouncements, not even through legislation, through judicial pronouncements. In fact, if we look at India, there's an exception on their books right now under their Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code, which still creates an exception that under the provision that criminalizes rape, which says that a man's sexual intercourse, non-consensual sexual intercourse with his wife who's above the age of 18 is not rape. So that exception still exists on their book, and once again it stems from this very patriarchal idea that the marriage allows for the man to have access to the woman's body at any time, however he wants. Now, this is entirely contrary to the idea of consent that we've come to know and understand, and consent has to be established every time when there is an intention to have sexual relations. So consent would essentially be established the same way we establish it in any kind of rape that is outside of the marriage affair as well. So if it is against the woman's will, if it's against her consent, or if consent was obtained through duress, or in fact one of the provisions in our rape laws is that if a woman was led to believe that she was married to a man but she was not in fact married to him, that's also a lack of consent. So you would establish lack of consent in a case of marital rape the same way you would establish it in a case of non-marital rape ordinary rape. But the problem is, in fact, the problem with marital rape is the lack of recognition that it is in fact a crime, because this pervasive idea that within the four corners of the marriage, the man has sexual access to the wife whenever he wants.